On October 24th, 1854, now there was a huge amount of speculation as to what exactly happened and why. This was the date when the real Battle of Balaclava happened. So, whose mistake it was? Who said what? And who gave the orders? What was the order? Whom was it given to? So, let's talk a little briefly about the real happening. So, during a siege at Sevastopol, the Russians had taken a beating by the British and they were retreating, that is, backing off. So, it became clear they were trying to take and steal some heavy guns, and the Light Brigade were ordered to ride in to protect the guns. Now, the Light Brigade, as the name suggests, was made up of lightly armored troops on horseback, and the cavalry with the highest social status soldiers, the section of the army which was the most expensive to get into. So the cavalry were the posh soldiers. This also would help us to understand the upper class criticism that is given as a hint in the poem. Why was this an expensive affair? Because in order to get into this troop, one had to buy his own horse, his equipments, etc., sword, etc. And as a result, the cavalry was disrespected by many of the working class troops. So particularly because they often didn't get into the battle and they were led often by Lord Lufton or who was, in a jokingly or mockingly called as Lord Look-on. Because they never got really involved in battle. They never did anything. They were not intended to be used for fixed charges. So this was known as the Light Brigade that has never gone for battle. And in charge of the battle were three officers, Lord Racklin, Lord Cardigan and Lord Lucan. So all three of these men were rich upper class men who had no real experiences of leading war. So this is also important to know about the criticism of the upper classes, possibly in the terms of the poem. So Lord Racklin also ordered to the Light Brigade to protect the heavy guns, to ride in and to stop the Russians from taking away the guns. But there was some sort of miscommunication or mix-up in the, somewhere in the communication between these three officers, and the Light Brigade instead launched it in front of the enemy artillery at the end of the valley. So they went into the wrong place and they charged down to the valley because they charged at what they were supposed to charge, and it was the wrong thing. It wasn't the retreating troops, but it was the Russians on three sides of the valley with artillery and guns firing at them. And rather than retreating, the Light Brigade kept going on as they were committed to it. And they were just blown out by the shelling and bombing of the enemy artillery. They charged in, all 600 of them. They faced the Russians and they just had their sabers and their swords. So over 150 were killed with another 150 injured in what was a tragic fatal mission. Now at the same time, this was a historical period, very important in Britain's history, and in fact in the world's history, which is now known as the birth of war reporting. And for the very first time, news reporters, for example from the London Times, were going into the war zones and were writing about the battle. They were talking to the soldiers. There was no censorship at this point as there is today. There's a lot of censorship today for newspaper reporting. They were literally just writing about what happened during this Crimean War. And the news of this Light Brigade went into the newspapers. As you can see on your screen, this newspaper report was the very one that Tennyson read. And William Harvard Russell, writing for the London Times, described the event in November 14th. And you can see this in this picture. In this, he wrote about the blunder, the British blunder. The British public read about this hideous blunder This was read by Tennyson also, and he said he couldn't get it out of his head. The hideous blunder, and Tennyson does mention this in his poem, and he describes it, and he decides to write about it. It was then and there that he decides he's going to write about this. So the Light Brigade's mission was a stupid one, and it was a misunderstanding and a miscommunication. So it's interesting to know whether it is a positive or a negative one. And the writers, the reporters, did report about it.